From the shadows, the Vexeri Imperium had ruled the stars for over 10,000 years. Their sleek, crystalline ships carved through space like predators. Their weapons could shatter moons, and their soldiers, bred for conquest, knew nothing of mercy or defeat. 500 species served the Imperium, either as willing subjects or broken slaves. Their ancient technology was so advanced that newer civilizations often mistook them for gods when the Imperium's ships darkened their skies. Supreme Commander Valis stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominance, his 7-foot frame casting long shadows across the polished obsidian floor. His iridescent scales shimmered under the blue light of the tactical display, where a small, unassuming planet rotated slowly. "This is the source of the transmissions," he asked, his voice like gravel sliding across stone. Admiral Xar inclined her head, her crest flattening in deference. "Yes, Supreme Commander. The natives call it Earth. Primitive, water-rich world. The dominant species has only achieved rudimentary space travel." Valis's thin lips curled in amusement. "Assess their threat level." "Negligible," Tar replied without hesitation. "Their weapons are chemical-based. Their defenses are non-existent by our standards. They haven't even colonized their own solar system properly. How many conquest vessels will we need?" The Admiral tilted her head, calculating. "One would be sufficient, but protocol suggests 3 for a species of their population size." Valis nodded. 3 vessels, each capable of sterilizing a continent, would be overkill for such a primitive world. But the Vexeri had not built their empire by underestimating potential threats. "Dispatch the vessels. Standard procedure. Offer submission or extinction." The conquest of Earth should have been a footnote in the endless annals of Vexeri expansion. It wasn't. The first Vexeri ship entered Earth's atmosphere over the Pacific Ocean, its massive form displacing air with enough force to create tsunami warnings across coastal regions. The humans responded not with the expected panic, but with calculated precision. Before the ship could deploy its conquest protocols, a barrage of missiles, primitive but numerous, swarmed toward it from submarines hidden in the depths below. The Vexeri shields easily deflected the first wave, as expected, but then something unexpected happened. The second wave wasn't aimed at penetrating the shields. Instead, the missiles detonated in carefully calculated patterns around the ship, creating disruptive electromagnetic pulses that interfered with the Vexeri's sensor arrays. In those few moments of blindness, human stealth aircraft launched from carriers delivered specialized warheads directly against the ship's hull. These weren't simple explosives. They contained nanites, reverse-engineered from technology recovered from a Vexeri scout ship that had crashed decades earlier. The conquest vessel didn't explode in a spectacular fireball. Instead, it began to list, its systems failing section by section as the nanites corrupted its crystalline technology. When the ship crashed into the ocean, the Vexeri realized something unprecedented. They had underestimated a species. Admiral Xar's crest flattened completely against her skull as she delivered the news to Supreme Commander Valis. To lose a conquest vessel was unprecedented. To lose it to a pre-interstellar species was incomprehensible. How? Valis's question cut through the tense silence of the command chamber. They knew we were coming," Xar said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The humans had technology they shouldn't have. They knew our weaknesses." "Impossible," Valis growled. "They are primitives. They have no interstellar capability." And yet, Xar gestured to the tactical display where the wreckage of the conquest vessel was being methodically salvaged by human submersibles. "They defeated us." Valis's eyes narrowed to slits. "Send the entire Fifth Fleet. I want that planet reduced to ash." The Vexeri Fifth Fleet was the pride of the Imperium. 50 warships, each carrying enough firepower to level a civilization. They emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, a wall of destruction poised to descend upon Earth. But Earth was waiting. As the fleet approached, they detected nothing unusual. Human satellites observed them, of course, But these were primitive observation platforms, easily neutralized. The Vexeri battle computers calculated a 99.98% chance of total victory. Then, as the fleet entered the optimal attack formation, numerous small objects approached from behind the moon. The Vexeri sensors identified them as simple satellites or space debris, not worth targeting. This was their second mistake. The debris turned out to be stealth platforms, each housing a quantum disruptor, technology the humans should not have possessed for at least another 1,000 years. The disruptors didn't attack the Vexeri ships directly. Instead, they created localized fields that prevented the precisely calibrated Vexeri targeting systems from functioning. Blind and unable to fire effectively, the Vexeri fleet found itself under attack from all directions. Human ships, small, agile, and built for close combat, swarmed the larger Vexeri vessels. Their technology was indeed inferior, but their tactics were unlike anything the Vexeri had encountered in millennia of conquest. The humans didn't fight to win by overwhelming force. They fought to survive, to adapt, to exploit weaknesses the Vexeri didn't know they had. They used suicide runs, decoys, and electronic warfare beyond what should have been possible for their technological level. And they targeted the fleet commanders, with precision that spoke of intimate knowledge of Vexeri ship design. Human strike teams boarded the command vessels and specifically targeted the bridge crew. They weren't interested in wholesale destruction. They wanted information. When the battle ended, 23 Vexeri warships had been destroyed or disabled. The remainder retreated, their commanders unwilling to continue against an enemy that defied all strategic logic. For the first time in recorded history, a Vexeri fleet had been defeated, not by another established galactic power, but by a species that hadn't even colonized their own moon. In the aftermath, the Imperium's intelligence division made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the Vexeri High Command. Humans had been aware of the Vexeri for decades. They had recovered not just one scout ship, but several. They had captured Vexeri soldiers and studied them, while the Imperium had been dismissing Earth as just another conquest waiting to happen. Humanity had been preparing for war. Supreme Commander Valus stood before the Imperial Council, his proud posture now rigid with tension. The 9 members of the Council, the oldest and most powerful Vexeri in the Imperium, regarded him with cold, calculating eyes. "You have failed," said the first counselor, her ancient voice cutting like a blade. "Twice now, these humans have defied the Imperium." "They were prepared for us," Valus replied, careful to keep any hint of excuse from his tone. "They have been studying our technology, our tactics. They know things they should not know." "Explain," demanded the third counselor. "We believe they have had access to Vexeri technology for at least 60 of their years. Scout ships, crashed or shot down over their planet, have provided them with examples of our technology. They have adapted quickly." "That is impossible," the second counselor said. "No species makes such leaps in understanding." The seventh counselor, known for his study of subjugated species, leaned forward. "Perhaps we have been too dismissive of these humans. What do we know of them?" Valus activated a holographic display. Images of human civilization, cities, armies, technology, floated before the council. "They are adaptable beyond any species we have encountered. Their history is one of constant warfare, not against external threats, but against themselves. They have been honing their skills at killing each other for millennia. And now they turn those skills against us," mused the seventh counselor. "Yes, and they learn quickly. Each engagement, even when they lose, provides them with more information. They are already incorporating our technology into their weapons." "This cannot stand," the first counselor declared. "The Imperium has never failed to conquer a target world. We will not start now." "I recommend a full-scale invasion," Valus said. "No more conquest vessels or standard fleets. We commit the Grand Armada." The council chamber fell silent. The Grand Armada had not been deployed in its entirety for over 3,000 years. It represented the full military might of the Vexeri Imperium. Thousands of warships, millions of soldiers, planet-killing weapons that could render Earth uninhabitable in hours. Granted, the first counselor finally said, "Assemble the Grand Armada. These humans will learn what it means to defy the Imperium." As Valis left the council chamber, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Vexeri had started something they might not be able to finish. The humans had done more than resist. They had studied, adapted, and struck back with frightening efficiency. And somehow, despite all logic, they seemed to be enjoying the challenge. The Reckoning. 6 months after the retreat of the Fifth Fleet, the Grand Armada of the Vexeri Imperium assembled at the edge of the Sol system. 3,000 warships, ranging from agile destroyers to behemoth dreadnoughts, formed a sphere around the solar system, cutting off all potential escape routes. At the center of the formation was the Imperial Wrath, Supreme Commander Valis's flagship, and the most powerful weapon the Vexeri had ever created. Valis stood on the command deck, his scales dulled with stress despite the cosmetic treatments he had undergone before this historic deployment. The Grand Armada had never failed to crush a civilization. Today would be no different. It couldn't be. "All ships report ready, Supreme Commander," Admiral Xar announced. She had survived the Fifth Fleet's defeat, but the experience had changed her. Where once she had regarded lesser species with dismissive superiority, now there was caution in her eyes. "Begin the advance," Valis ordered. "All weapons free. No terms will be offered. Earth is to be cleansed." The Grand Armada moved inward, their formation tightening as they approached the outer planets of the solar system. Vexeri sensors swept ahead, searching for any sign of human defenses. They found nothing. "This is strange," Char murmured, studying the sensor readings. "No resistance, no defense platforms. Their orbital stations are continuing normal operations." Valis's crest rose in suspicion. "They must know we are here. Perhaps they have surrendered," an officer suggested. "Humans do not surrender," Valis replied, remembering the reports from the earlier engagements. "They adapt and counter. Be alert for deception." The Armada continued its advance, passing Neptune, then Uranus, then Saturn. Still no resistance. The tension on the bridge of the Imperial Wrath grew with each passing moment. This wasn't right. The humans had fought with unexpected ferocity before. Why were they passive now? As the Armada approached the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, Valis's anxiety peaked. "Full scan of the asteroid field," he ordered. "Check for hidden weapon platforms." The scan revealed nothing unusual, just rocks and ice, drifting as they had for billions of years. The Armada passed Mars, now within striking distance of Earth. The blue planet hung in space, seemingly defenseless. "Supreme Commander," Xar said, her voice tight with confusion. "We're still detecting no military response. Their global communication networks are operating normally. There's no sign they've even noticed us." "Impossible," Valis hissed. "Prepare the first strike. Target their military installations and—" An alarm blared, cutting him off. The tactical officer's crest flared in shock. "Multiple hyperspace signatures. Behind us." The space behind the Grand Armada tore open as hundreds of ships emerged from hyperspace, ships with the unmistakable hallmarks of human design, but impossibly advanced. They were sleek, predatory, and bristling with weapons that glowed with Vexeri energy signatures. "How?" Xar gasped. "Humans don't have hyperspace technology." Another officer's voice rose in panic. "More signatures, above and below our formation." The tactical display transformed into a nightmare. The Grand Armada, the pride of the Imperium, was surrounded. Hundreds, then thousands of human ships appeared, encircling the Vexeri forces in a perfect three-dimensional cage. "Open fire," Valis commanded, his voice cracking with strain. The Grand Armada responded, unleashing a barrage of energy weapons and missiles toward the human fleet. But something was wrong. Many of the weapons failed to fire, and those that did seemed to lose power before reaching their targets. "Our weapons are being jammed," the tactical officer reported. "Something is interfering with the power distribution systems." "Sabotage," Tar whispered, horrified understanding dawning on her face. "They've been inside our systems all along." Valis turned to her, rage building. "Explain." "The technology they stole from us. The ships they captured. They didn't just study them. They found a way to access our network. Our ships are connected, Supreme Commander. They share targeting data, power management protocols. And the humans found a way to exploit that connection." Valis finished, the full magnitude of the disaster becoming clear. As if to confirm his worst fears, the communications officer called out, "Incoming transmission. Supreme Commander." From the human fleet. On screen, Valis ordered, bracing himself. The holographic display shifted to show a human female, her dark skin contrasting with the white uniform she wore. She appeared calm, almost serene, facing the commander of the force sent to destroy her world. "Supreme Commander Valis," she said, her voice translated perfectly into the Vexeri language. "I am Admiral Helena Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. I believe we need to discuss terms." "Humans do not dictate terms to the Imperium," Valis snarled. Admiral Chen smiled slightly. "With respect, Commander, look at your tactical display. Your armada is surrounded, your weapons systems compromised, and your ship's power grids are under our control. The terms are simple: retreat and you live. Stay, and we will be forced to demonstrate just how thoroughly we've understood your technology." "This is impossible," Valis insisted. "You are a pre-hyperspace civilization. You cannot have built this fleet." "We didn't build it all," Chen replied. "We captured quite a few of your ships over the decades. Others we constructed using the principles we learned. You've been visiting Earth for over a century, Commander. Did you think all those scout ships you lost were accidents?" The revelation hit Valis like a physical blow. The Imperium had been cataloging Earth as a potential conquest for generations, sending scout ships to observe and report. How many had never returned? How many had fallen into human hands, providing them with the building blocks of Vexeri technology? As a demonstration, Chen continued, her tone hardening, "We will now disable the weapon systems on your flagship." Before Valis could respond, alerts blared across the bridge. Display after display went dark as the Imperial Wrath's primary weapons shut down, their power cores going into emergency containment mode. "How is this possible?" Valis demanded, turning to his officers. "They're using our own command protocols against us," the security officer explained, frantically trying to counter the intrusion. "It's as if they have command-level access to our systems." Admiral Chen's image remained on screen, her expression now solemn. "We've spent decades preparing for this day, Commander. We knew you would come eventually. The difference is, we didn't underestimate you. We studied, we learned, and we adapted your own technology to defend ourselves." "The Imperium does not surrender," Valis declared, though the conviction in his voice had faltered. "I'm not asking for surrender," Chen replied. "I'm offering coexistence. Retreat from our system. Acknowledge Earth and its colonies as sovereign territory, off-limits to Vexeri conquest. In return, we won't expand into your current territories, and we'll share certain technological advances we've made by combining our science with yours." Valis stared at the human admiral, trying to comprehend what was happening. In 10,000 years, no species had ever forced the Vexari to negotiate. The Imperium conquered or destroyed. There was no third option. Until now. "And if I refuse?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Then we disable your fleet ship by ship and tow it remains back to Earth as salvage," Chen said simply. "We've already demonstrated we can do it, but that would cost lives on both sides, and unlike the Vexari, we don't see that as the preferred outcome." For the first time in his long career, Supreme Commander Valis faced a decision that was not found in any Vexeri military protocol. The Grand Armada was effectively neutralized, caught in a trap sprung by a species that should have been easy prey. "I will need to consult with the Imperial Council," he finally said. "You have 1 hour," Chen replied. "After that, we'll be forced to take more direct action." When the transmission ended, the bridge of the Imperial Wrath remained silent. The officers looked to Valis, waiting for guidance in a situation none of them had been trained to handle. "Connect me to the Council," Valis ordered, his voice hollow. The 9 faces of the Imperial Council appeared before him, their expressions shifting from expectation to confusion as Valis explained the situation. "This cannot be allowed to stand," the first counselor declared. "The Imperium does not negotiate with lesser species." "With respect, Counselor," Valis replied, "we have no choice. They have neutralized the Grand Armée. They have technology that matches or exceeds our own. And they have shown remarkable restraint. They could have destroyed us, but instead they offer terms." "You suggest we capitulate?" the second counselor asked, incredulous. "I suggest we adapt," Valis answered. "As they have adapted, the humans have studied us for decades, learning our strengths and weaknesses. Perhaps it is time we learn from them." The debate raged for the remainder of the hour, but in the end, reality could not be denied. The Grand Armada, the invincible fist of the Imperium, had been rendered impotent by a species that had been traveling in space for less than a century. When Admiral Chen's image reappeared on the screen, Valis had his answer. "The Imperium accepts your terms," he said, each word tasting like acid. "We will withdraw from the Sol system and recognize Earth's sovereignty." Chen nodded, showing neither triumph nor gloating. "A wise decision, Commander. We'll transmit the formal agreement for your review. Once signed, you're free to depart." "Before I go," Valis said, curiosity overcoming his wounded pride, "how did you do it? How did you advance so quickly?" Chen considered him for a moment before answering. "Necessity, Commander. Your Imperium has had 10,000 years of unchallenged dominance. You became predictable. Humanity has spent its entire history fighting, adapting, and overcoming. When we found ourselves facing an enemy that could destroy our world, we did what we've always done. We evolved." As the Grand Armada withdrew from the Sol system hours later, Valis stood at the viewport of the Imperial Wrath, watching Earth recede into the distance. For the first time in the history of the Vexari Imperium, they had met a species they could not conquer, a species that had forced them to negotiate as equals. The galaxy would never be the same. Word spread quickly throughout the stars. The invincible Vexari, conquerors of 1,000 worlds, had been stopped, not by another ancient power, but by a young, vibrant species from an unremarkable planet. Across the Imperium's territories, subjugated species began to whisper of resistance. If humans could stand against the Vexari, perhaps others could too. The aura of invincibility that had surrounded the Imperium for millennia had been shattered. On Earth, humanity looked to the stars with new confidence. They had faced extinction, and not only survived but thrived. The technology gained from the encounter accelerated human development exponentially. Within a decade, human colonies expanded throughout the solar system and beyond. The Vexari Imperium, for its part, began the painful process of reassessment. The Imperial Council, guided by the now influential Valis, initiated reforms that would have been unthinkable before the Earth encounter. The Imperium would still be powerful, still be feared, but no longer would it rely solely on force and terror. Because somewhere out there, other species might be watching and learning, just as humanity had. And in the dark between the stars, new possibilities emerged. A galaxy where dominance gave way to coexistence, where strength was measured not just in weapons but in adaptability. A galaxy forever changed because a supposedly insignificant species had shown that even the mightiest empire could be brought to the negotiating table by those they had underestimated.